I want to create people who understand how to be change makers by giving them that experience of making change and then allowing them to take that out into the world wherever they go, into their different fields and areas of expertise to be the design thinkers, to be the change makers, and ultimately, I hope, make the world a better place.
That was Julia Allworth, who created and runs the Innovation Hub at the University of Toronto, where students work as consultants on projects to improve the student experience. We had a fantastic conversation, and I think this episode touches on more aspects of leading a connected college than maybe any other. Experiential learning, design thinking, building skills and relationships, reimagining student employment, the college to career transition, working across differences and neurodiversity. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Welcome to the Connected College podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Felix. I've helped more than 100 colleges and universities change what they offer, how they operate, and how they're organized to enable student success. And if you're a leader in higher ed and you think that the silos and separations get in the way of student success, then this podcast and my upcoming book, The Connected College, are for you. We're here to learn and work together to bust silos, question tradition, and forge partnerships so that students feel connected to their college, their community, their coursework, and their careers. Welcome, Julia. I'm so excited for our conversation about experiential learning.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's a great topic.
Tell us a little bit about how you got started in higher ed and what you're up to today.
I had an interesting path towards higher ed because I had about a 10-year career before I came in, but it was all education. So I started my career in supplemental K to 12 education services, so managing and tutoring centers and things like that. And then I did a little bit of a stint in private career colleges where I managed and directed a few campuses. And then right before coming into higher ed, I was working for a government funded employment services agency where I would work with employment service centers for all kinds of clientele that found themselves unemployed, overseeing those programs. And then, I don't know, between about 12 or 13 years ago now, I came into the University of Toronto in the Career Center, and I managed the team that works with employers that want to hire graduates. And we ran all the career fairs and the job board, and I brought my experience to that. And then I got into what I do now, which is leading the Innovation Hub. So about 10 years ago, almost in 2016, I started this Innovation Hub. And at the time, we didn't really know what it was going to be. We just thought, let's do a 2-year pilot where we use design thinking to create better student experiences for strategic planning, to bring people together. And that's really evolved over the last 10 years.
That's great. I love the different twists and turns in that journey, all fitting together to help you do what you do now. And it seems like design thinking was maybe a through line in that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
It's interesting because I think like experiential learning, design thinking, all those things are there. I didn't actually really learn too much about design thinking until around the time I was doing my MBA. And that was at the time that I started the Innovation Hub. It was really interesting because once I learned about it, and especially once I started practicing it with students and getting to build some expertise there, I really realized it's what I've been doing all along. That all the work that I've been doing has been human centered. Every role I've had has really focused on relationships in some way and understanding people. My major in my undergrad was psychology. So I've always had a real interest in people. And design thinking just really brought it all together because it has those collaborative aspects, those relational aspects, and the concept of empathy and designing with rather than for people and bringing people together just really resonated with the way that I've always worked. And one area that I would say that I'm particularly passionate about is those transitions from the academic world to the employment world. And I think design thinking and experience doing design thinking is a great form of experiential learning in a way that students can really take what they learn academically and apply it to the quote unquote real world or like beyond university, which I know is a really scary place for students. So I think just throughout my career, I've just been really passionate about people and systems and how things work together and going on that curious journey together with students. And
Best way to do it, right, is to create these things together and to link the coursework and the careers and to create better experiences for people. Julia, I'm really intrigued by this innovation lab you've created to create better student experiences. Tell us a little bit about that. How does that work?
a little bit about what life in the Innovation Hub looks like today. So, what it looks like today is now I hire in a co curricular capacity students from all different disciplines, all different study levels, first year undergrad through upper year PhD students. And I put them on teams together and we train them in how to do design thinking. And then, parallel to that, we have our partners who are divisions and departments within the university who fund our student teams to do projects where they get to act like consultants. So they're like design thinking consultants. And they come in and they tackle issues or challenges like student mental health, or the libraries want to build a new space, or different programming experiences of students with disabilities. So lots of different types of topics, but all things that the students really understand because they're part of as students. And in doing that, what I've tried to do is build this real world like opportunity for these students to take what they've learned academically, but also learn this new skill set, which is design thinking, and apply it to these projects and go out and talk to people and make observations and really get to understand how things currently work so that they can make recommendations and bring insights back to the partners.
And you mentioned the focus of the Innovation Hub is improving student experiences. And I think student experience, student success, not exactly synonymous, but adjacent. And I would love to hear your definition of student success. A great experience is part of that, but how do you define student success?
So my definition of student success is really it's really about knowing oneself. If I had one wish for a student leaving higher ed, like having finished and going out to whatever's next for them, it's that they would feel this sense of confidence. It's the number one thing that all students ask me or tell me that they want to develop during the time in the Innovation Hub. And so I've thought a lot about what is confidence because a lot of them think about it as standing up in front of a room and speaking. But I've come to realize that I think confidence comes from being comfortable in one's own skin. And the only way to get there is to get to know oneself, what they're good at, what they bring to this world, how they're uniquely qualified for something in a way that no one else is. And I think it's experiential learning that makes that connection. So confidence, feeling comfortable in one's own skin, but really knowing oneself, I think to me is ultimately what people and what students need to go forward and have the sense that they can take on anything and that they know what they want to take on because they know who they are and they know what they care about.
I love that definition of student success, the idea that student success is knowing yourself and having the confidence and the comfort to take things on, take on new challenges, learn new things. If student success is knowing yourself and gaining confidence and feeling comfortable and knowing what to take on, learning things, challenging yourself, what role does experiential learning play in gaining that comfort and confidence and knowledge of yourself? How does that happen?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely essential. I don't know that we can know ourselves if not in the context of working collaboratively with others or working on projects. I always say to my students, my real definition of learning is that it means that you have to be uncomfortable. So in design thinking, we talk about failure as learning, right? And we talk about failing fast and failing forward and failing often and all these things. And in in the research intensive university that I'm part of, failure can be a really dirty word for students, right? They don't like to hear it. So what we try to do is really get comfortable with this idea that we're not learning unless we're somewhat uncomfortable. There's an embodiment of it. There's a feeling that goes along with it. If I think about the biggest lessons that I've had in my life, there's usually some kind of mistake or like gut punch moment or visceral feeling that goes along with it, that it creates a memory of something that I now know that I didn't before.
Hard stuff is
And
good
that's
for
kind of
you.
what, yeah, that's what it's like for students. So coming around to experiential learning creates those opportunities, right? It creates those opportunities for this really embodied learning, right? It takes the theoretical and helps people bring it to life because typically it involves working with other people and typically it involves working on something that has some kind of practical application or meaning. And I have to engage in a process of seeing myself and seeing how I work as I'm doing the learning. So I would say that a huge part of what enables students to get to know themselves is finding a comfortable, safe, or safer space, I should say, to engage in experiential learning and the ability to really bring one's full self and be oneself to the extent that they're able. And I think that's been really the magic of what we've created in the Innovation Hub is just really that the whole thing is experiential learning. And students come to meet other students from different disciplines. And then they talk to our students who become our design research participants. And the main thing that they realize is that we're all the same. Everyone has imposter syndrome. Everyone has insecurities. Everyone's struggling with something. And oftentimes the students are coming into it saying, I thought I was the only one. So it's these experiences that enable those connections and those conversations and those aha moments and realizations that I think ultimately help people understand who they are in the context of definitely the university, but more so in the context of each other and in the context of the world.
So it's teamwork, it's application, it's reflection, it's belonging. And earlier you mentioned some examples, mental health, libraries, students with disabilities. What are some of your favorite projects to come out of the Innovation Hub where students had the chance to do all these things?
Yeah, there's two ways I guess I could answer that. One is there's a lot of projects where tangible things have come of it. I love that when I go to the fourth floor of our largest library, Robarts Library on campus, we can see how it's been redesigned because of the report that the students talk to other students about what is the library to them. And they really uncovered a lot of insights about the library that we were able to build this beautiful report and give it to the architects and they built that. So it's really neat to see the physical representation. And there's lots of examples of work. When we worked on the presidential and provostial task force on student mental health, a lot of the conversations that took place with students around mental health were really deep conversations that really touched all of us. But that ultimately led to this recommendation about our university becoming a culture of care. And now to see that language come out in the report back to the president and provost, but also as commonplace now in our culture that people have started talking about creating a culture of care and how supporting student mental health starts by taking thoughtful and caring approach in every area of the university to see those sorts of culture changes. But for me personally, as much as I'm proud of the teams and proud of those successes, and there's many other examples, the projects that I think about are actually the ones where the teams struggled the most, where they disagreed on what was really going on. And we had to work through some big feelings around polarizing viewpoints because there's a lot of tension that can arise in design thinking. Oftentimes, and I won't name necessarily a specific project because this is a theme that comes up, but oftentimes when we're working with the data, so at the point where our students have gone out and interviewed or done group feedback sessions where they've listened deeply to the stories of lots of different students. And now they're sitting with all that data and trying to make sense of it and trying to see the themes. There's this tension that comes across when there's an issue that students are facing. An example I'll use actually is we worked with our health and wellness department. This was a different mental health focused project. The question was really, what are students doing or how are students supporting their own mental health outside of clinical services like counseling? So, what is it that students do that's supportive of their own mental health? And why do some students seem to experience on the spectrum of mental health? What are the students who really are struggling? What's going on with them? And then what are the students who seem to be thriving in spite of adversity? What's going on with them? And one of the tensions that came up in looking at this data was the team's idea of some of the people on the team felt like more or less, and I'm just going to say it in the way that my interpretation was, but more or less like it's because the university is this and this. So it's because the university is so intense. It's because there's so much pressure. It's because it's so hard to get good grades, or it's because of the tight deadlines, or any number of things. And that's why students' mental health is suffering because of what's imposed on them by the university as the sort
Right.
of
All the
entity.
pressures, so to speak.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And so so that sort of camp said the solution really lies in the university being different. And so students will have better mental health if the university is different. But then on the other side, we had all this really interesting data of students who are actually thriving in spite of major difficulties academically or personally. And we were looking at, okay, what's the difference? And I won't go too much into the data, the reports on our website, but ultimately what it came down to is we realized that the students, they were all at the same university and the pressure was all more or less the same. But the students who were thriving were taking brave steps towards taking care of their mental health when they weren't okay. So they were reaching out and talking to people. They were asking for help. They weren't isolating themselves. Whereas other students might not have been taking those steps because for whatever reason they couldn't. And so it was really interesting because we looked at no matter how the university is and the types of pressures that exist here in higher ed, which I don't think is unique to our university alone, there are differences between students and their mental health. And why this project was, or these sorts of projects were my favorite, is that I always think in those debates with students where they would get heated, right? Because there was arguments and people were really talking because they're so passionate about this. People are learning about themselves. They're learning who they are in a team. They're learning who they are in an issue and how they're relating to that issue. And they're ultimately learning about themselves. And there was a lot of difficult moments that I'm sure those students will remember. But those are my favorite sorts of projects, not because I like to see students struggle, but because of the learning that I know comes out of it at the end and how in their reflections at the end of those projects the impact to the students that work on them is so deep and memorable.
Yeah. You could replace struggle with stretch, right? And then it becomes even more apparent why those
Yeah.
are some of the most useful experiences and why they are the opportunities to grow and challenge yourself and learn new things and have a shared experience, maybe bond with teammates and clients. So I get it. And what I don't get totally is the operating model of the hubs. Do you have a space you operate out of? Are the students paid employees? Or do they get credit? Give us a little bit of the nuts and bolts of how you're making all these learning experiences possible.
Yeah, yeah. We definitely didn't start out this way. We started with no space and minimal resources, but over the years, we do now have a space where our space actually it's a co-working sort of a hub actually where we work out of and we're housed in our student commons. So we're right where the students are, which is really great. The funding for our work, a lot of it comes from our Division of Student Life, which is the central student affairs division. So they've invested in this sort of entity where for the space and the operational budget. But the projects themselves actually get funded by the project partners. And the students are all paid, and most of the students are paid through our work study program. So that's a really great model because the university shares in the cost. It makes it affordable, but it also is very intentional with the learning outcomes and objectives that need to be met in those programs. Really, the model is we hire students with maybe minimal qualitative research experience or none, and we essentially train them. So they learn by doing. We train them step by step through the design thinking model. We have operationalized a lot of it. There's a lot of templates and resources and things, but they go through and they start with an environmental scan and they build an annotated bibliography around the issue. And then they look for who the students that they're going to speak to. And we leverage our university's communication channels to reach out to students and other stakeholders to participate in either interviews or group feedback sessions. They get all that data. It's all transcribed and coded and put into a qualitative research software. And then they do the analysis. And ultimately, build a report that includes different personas of students, recommendations, the insights, design principles. So it becomes a really valuable resource for the partner to use. Typically, we don't do a lot of the actual prototyping and testing, although for some of our projects we do. It's a co-curricular model for paid employment for the students that get involved. As we've grown over the years, we've also implemented a shared leadership model. So students often go from the researcher positions into maybe a team lead position. So every team has a team lead. I have some full-time internship programs on my team that are 1-year internships for students that are meant to be for gap year or recent graduate students. And that is the full-time model because every role in our organization is intended to be a learning and development opportunity. So my team is constantly changing. Every year we have a new one and such. The culture changes, but because we've been doing it, we've been able to create resources that can help take new teams through the entire process. And the departments in the university just keep coming to us for more projects. We've started doing some documentary work as well. So it's like dabbling in other ways of storytelling. Last year, we released a documentary called The First 48 Hours. It was international students, the first 48 hours, where we followed 7 international students who basically filmed themselves through vlogs and different content from the time they left their home country, their journey here, in their first 48 hours in Canada. It's really powerful. It's a great documentary live online now. And then we're currently in the process of, in the fall, we're going to release a bookend to that, which is International Student Life After Graduation, which looks at experience of international students after they graduate. So lots of different sort of storytelling and design thinking based work, but all of it is done by students for students.
Yeah, and at a in a hub that's within the commons, sort of meeting students where they are.
Yeah.
It sounds amazing, but it also sounds challenging, and I would imagine things are changing. Like you mentioned you have a different crop of students every year.
Yeah.
What's changing about the role that these experiential learning projects using design thinking, are they different now than they were 5 years ago, and where will they be in 5 years? Are you seeing some trends in the data that you gather, or how you engage people, or the results you get, or how you communicate? Like, what's changing about the work you're doing?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, so much is changing. And in a lot of ways, the more things change, the more they stay the same because our work really is about sort of the core human needs when you get down to it. So I think the way that people show up in the stories they tell are changing, but at the core of what the human needs are, it's not changing as much. It was interesting. I think the biggest shift I've seen in the students was over the pandemic and coming back from the pandemic. And since then, and I think one of the things is that, for whatever reason, the pandemic really changed people's ways that they want to interact or that they show up in group settings. And that's been really interesting in our work. And one of the ways that we've addressed that is since the pandemic, since we've been back working on campus, our work is 100% in person. So we don't offer the opportunity for hybrid work or online work, which is really uncomfortable for a lot of our students because that's what they've gotten used to. But I'm a firm believer that this work can be done well online. We did it over the pandemic. But when people get together, there's an energy in the room when you're looking at data, when you're talking to people that you can't really get online to the same extent. So we essentially force them to work in person with each other. We're very upfront about that at the beginning of before we hire people that this is 100% in person. You got
That's
to be
great.
able to be on campus like 3 days a week. All the work that's done happens together. So it's not everyone takes their work away and goes home and does it. It's we come together. We have extended co-work sessions, extended workshops, time together. And it really creates this environment where people have to come together. And I think I have seen the resistance to that grow. But when people do actually come together and work together, they always tell me at the end of the term how valuable that was for them and how this in person group experience is something that they don't get to have in other contexts because so much has gone virtual or online. So to me, that's really important. I don't know if it's a general trend, but what I've seen on our team is a lot more neurodiversity. There's a lot of students who will identify as neurodiverse, either on the autism spectrum or ADHD, different learning styles. Students are very aware of how who they are as learners impacts how they show up in the work. We're really proud that we have a lot of neurodiversity on our team. I think the type of work we do attracts the kinds of minds and thinking that comes with neurodiversity. I have seen differences in the way that people interact with one another, but we've really just tried to, I don't know, maybe I'm stubborn, I'm not sure, but I've really tried to keep it so that people are still coming together and create as safe a space as possible for people to come and show up as who they are and have a space where they can feel comfortable being fully themselves and being in the work fully themselves so they can feel what that feels like. And most of them, by the time they leave, they know that they want to find a workplace where they can do that. That's something that's really important to them. They have to be able to show up as they are. And when they feel the safety of being around people who get them, being around people who know them, not just on a work level, but a personal level. We have lunches together in our space every single day. So people come for lunch and eat together and get to know each other. That's really powerful for them. And they want that in the future. That's a choice that they want to have in the career that they take on. They don't want to have to show up in a certain way of quote unquote professionalism. They want to be able to be themselves.
What's really interesting is it's design thinking on a meta level too, because you're using it on the projects, but in a way, they're prototyping their future employment experience, right? Learning about working in person, they're learning about working on a team, they're learning about themselves. I like that the kind of the prototyping and the design thinking is working on many levels. That's cool.
You've discovered my worst kept secret, Elliot, which
Yeah.
is really, it's not about the projects at all. People get excited about the projects, and I think the projects have impact. But to me, like you said, on a meta level, the whole purpose of the Innovation Hub is so that people can come in and kind of design themselves, like learn about themselves. And because my whole career trajectory has really been about that academic to employment transition and how people find themselves following career paths and what's required to do that. For me, the Innovation Hub is really this sort of space in which we get to really workshop what that looks like in practice. What does it look to have a place where you can come and bring your academic knowledge and skills and have these aha moments where you see, oh, well, this is like what we learned in this class. And oh, in sociology, we call it this, but in psychology, we call it this. And in engineering, it's this. And they're all talking to each other. They're seeing that applied, learning what it means to be a good employee, learning what it means to build workplace skills, and then starting to think about where can I really take this? And what's cool is that after 10 years of doing this, I've got alum who've worked with me who are now working in leadership levels in government, are now leading design thinking processes where they are, or in UX design, or in policy development. And it's cool because to me, my idea of how this is really a change making vehicle is that I want to create people who understand how to be change makers by giving them that experience of making change and then allowing them to take that out into the world wherever they go, into their different fields and areas of expertise, to be the design thinkers, to be the change makers, and ultimately, I hope, make the world a better place.
Yeah, I hope so too. And it comes right back to your definition of student success, right? Where you know yourself, you've gained confidence and comfort in discomfort and challenge, and you're ready to take on the world. I love the model. I love the meta model. And I really appreciate your time and insights today, Julia, and all the great work you're doing at the Hub.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks, Elliot. It's great talking to you.
Thanks for listening to the Connected College podcast. Subscribe to my Connected College newsletter at elliottfelix.com for insights and excerpts from my upcoming book, tools you can download, and special offers. You can also find more information about talks I've given, articles I've written, and upcoming events there. And please support the podcast by rating and reviewing it wherever you're listening. Let's create connected colleges where students will succeed.